Hello and welcome to our spring mentorship mini series. I am Dr. Dan Kalish. I'm going to talk about the gut-brain connection and how to correct brain issues with GI protocols. Sounds kind of complicated because it is really complicated, but I think it's one of the most important skill sets to learn in functional medicine is in general the connection between the gut and the brain, and the gut and the immune system, and the gut and the hormones. And the gut is everywhere. And every case you have, you're going to learn over the years, it just goes back to gut, gut, gut. How can that be? It's just the way that your body works. So, for those of you that are brand new to all this and it's your first time, I am Dr. Dan Kalish. I've been in practice for 31 years. I founded the Kalish Institute for Functional Medicine back in 2006. We've trained thousands of doctors, and my life goal for a long time now has been to make successful, to build successful, to create successful functional medicine practices. I've worked with the Mayo Clinic. We've had our students get jobs at Cleveland Clinic. We work with doctors at Johns Hopkins. We have all kinds of amazing academic powerhouse people in our community. I work a lot with the leading lab companies and supplement companies, and I'm actually still in practice one day a week, most weeks, see patients, and really have become, have become, just due to the fact that I'm old, one of the founders of the field. I was looking at this the other day. I started back in 1992. Functional medicine was coined as a term in 1991. I was actually around when somebody made the name up. We're like, what are we calling this now? Functional medicine? Okay, let's call it that. And now when I walk into a conference and I see all my buddies from 30 years ago, it's like, oh, okay, you retired? You retired? Or what are you doing? So I'm proud to be someone that helped create this field. And I want the next generation of doctors to take over like fast because I want to open a bicycle shop, in the Pacific Northwest or do something else. We need new practitioners in our field and a lot of them because there's a lot of patients. So that's really my main goal now is to get you guys trained in how to do this. And this again is one of the essential skill sets. So we do these free classes to get you inspired. We have my flagship class that's been going on since 2006 starting now. So any of you that want to really create the functional medicine practice of your dreams should sign up for this. You get $1,199 of a discount if you scan your phone thing with that QR code over there. Everybody knows how to do that right now. It's like when you're getting on the airplane, they scan your code. So scan that code. The actual QR code you scan with your phone, and you have to type in mini April 24, and you'll get the discount. And it's starting like now. This is the end of April. We're starting the end of April. And the mentorship is basically a year of intense lab interpretation education. At the end of that year, people understand how to run a functional medicine clinic in a really good way. And we've trained hundreds and hundreds of doctors in this sort of advanced class, and it works really well. It's a really good community of doctors if you're looking for a good community, and it's an online educational experience. You get to review your own cases, you get a whole clinical model, all the supplements that you should use, the exact names and dosages, and what does this marker mean? And we just go at it hours and hours a week. It's a crash course in how to interpret labs, and at the end of it, you'll be extremely good. In fact, at the end of 1 year, I would put up any of my mentorship graduates against anybody who's been in practice for 5 or 10 years, because these lab interpretation skills just don't come to you through osmosis. You have to, buckle up and do them. So if you really want to be the best in your field, sign up for the mentorship, and we still have a few spots open, and get the discount. What the heck? Save some money all at the same time. If you're brand new and you're just getting started and you haven't even ordered your first lab yet, we love you too. Scan that code, you get $100 off. You can order your first test through Rupa. Order a GI test, order an adrenal test, just get yourself started. Based on this class, you're probably going to want to order a GI test on yourself. And there's a whole bunch of options there, which we'll talk about when we get to the lab review part. I'll show you some of the labs that we actually use in our training programs and in the commonly used labs in terms of GI assessments, the best. I really use the 3 best. I'll just tell you right now, in case you leave early, GI Map from Diagnostic Solutions, GI Effects from Genova Lab, and GI 360 from doctor's data. And I have an example of each one of those that we'll look at. After I do the brief lecture here, we'll get into lab interpretation. I'll show you an example of each one of those. But DSL labs, GI map, Genova lab, GI effects test, and doctor's data, GI 360. Those are the three best lab companies in the industry. Order any one of those on yourself for your first GI test. Okay, you get $100 off of that. All right, now we're going to talk about parasites. Which ones? Well, Giardia, E. histo, and Crypto. And Blasto. That's a good place to start, isn't it? 4% of the global population has Giardia. 7% of the world population has E. histo. 500,000 people a year die from Crypto. It's not. These are like statistics. Blasto, 20%. You're going to see that 20% of the world population. So what do you think? What percent of the sick people coming into your clinic you think have these problems? Like a lot, okay? A lot. And yeah, you know, if you're not doing the gut testing, you're not doing functional medicine. I'm just going to come out and say it. If you think that MS patient or that cancer patient or that autistic kid or that dementia patient or that toenail fungus patient or that depression patient or that anxiety patient is somehow exempt from a GI assessment, you are just dead wrong. It doesn't matter if they have GI symptoms or not. The centerpiece of the body, the centerpiece of functional medicine is the microbiome and gut assessment. Dr. Timmons taught me this in 1992. It has been borne out in the previous couple of decades by research. You cannot turn around in a university research lab without hearing the term microbiome and ... It's all the rage right now. So the conventional scientific community is really caught up with what the naturopaths have been saying for generations. This stuff matters a lot for human health. You have to run a GI test on every single patient. And the things that we're really on the lookout for include parasitic infections, Giardia, E. histo, Crypto, Blasto. Those are ones that you're going to see on a regular basis that if you find a patient with one of these infections, I can guarantee you, if you get rid of that infection successfully, you're going to change that person's life. And I have a list of thousands of patients that would just stand up and say, yes, that is true, because now I'm pregnant because I got rid of my Blasto. I remember the first time this happened, it was actually Giardia. It was an infertility case. Couldn't get pregnant year after year after year. The month that we got rid of her Giardia, she got pregnant. Okay, Giardia affects hormones in a really big way, in a really big way. We had, and these are just a few cases, we had a kid, I will never forget this, who was on the autism spectrum. This is a long time ago, it's like 25 years ago. And when we found the Crypto and treated it, in this case, we used antibiotics. The kid started speaking for the first time in his life. Started to use language, you know, right at the end of the Crypto treatment. It was only a 10-day treatment. That was a pretty clear parasitic-driven, brain-related problem. You're going to see stuff like this in your clinic. So, did that kid have digestive symptoms? Yeah, probably a little bit, but that doesn't matter. We're not doing these tests based on symptoms. We're doing them because we're going to test everybody for gut function, because that is a core concept in functional medicine just in general, okay? If you're not testing people, these people are coming in and out of your clinic and you just don't know what's happening. So if you have a GI infection present and you treat it, many times you're going to see the change that the patient experiences is with cognitive functioning, with memory, with mood, with anxiety, with depression. Sometimes it's just sleep. People just all of a sudden can sleep well for the first time. It turns out that when we're sick and we have a bad GI infection, even if there's no GI symptoms, it just screws everything in your body up. Okay, so there's a variety of ways you can treat these. You can use antibiotics, you can use herbs. That's kind of a big decision that you probably want to make on a case-by-case basis. But what we're also going to talk about today is the general state of the microbiome, not just infections like parasites, which is really the headline, okay? You got to test for and get rid of the parasites. But also, how can we measure commensal bacteria and metabolites through organic acids testing, and I'll show you some examples of that. You can also measure commensal bacteria directly through PCR testing, which is pretty amazing that that can even happen. And we'll talk a little bit about polyphenols and how they work and how you can get a very comprehensive assessment of the microbiome itself, looking at the actual organisms that are there with PCR testing and the metabolites of those organisms with organic acids testing. You put those two pieces together, you've got your brain solutions right there. And sometimes they don't all correlate. Sometimes it's just one and not the other, right? So now, you got to pretend, there's like almost 1,000 people that signed up for this. So, hey, everybody, it's like a big crowd. It's like if we were at maybe like a rock and roll concert or a jazz show or something, and it's a pretty big stadium. There's like 1,000 people in the audience. You guys are all out there. I'm just imagining this. But I want you to put your hand up, imaginary hand up, if you order stool testing in your practice. And then I want to put your other hand up, both of your hands up, if you order stool tests for every new patient. And if both your hands aren't up, then you're not practicing functional medicine. You got to run stool tests on everybody, regardless of symptoms. Another hand-raising question, how many of you feel comfortable interpreting the microbiome portion of the labs we order? Nobody does. It's so complicated. No one even understands the microbiome part of this. I mean, you can understand a few organisms, but if anyone's got their hand up now, you probably have a PhD in microbiology from when you were younger and then you became a doctor or something. That's really, really complicated. But I want you to, in this class, I want to show you just some easy ways you can start to wrap your mind around the microbiome. The reason why we don't all do GI testing on every patient is because if they don't have GI symptoms, it's hard to motivate people to do the testing, And so somehow you have to be able to explain the value of the test to a patient that has no GI symptoms, and that takes a little bit of practice. We actually even have a class on this. I have a whole month-long course on how to sell patients a GI test if they have no GI symptoms. I don't know when that class is being offered, but we offer it. It's the GI lab ordering class. You can keep an eye out for it, okay? Because that class, I mean, if you're not doing this, you need to learn how to do it. And it's not an easy thing to figure out. It takes a little while. So then why would you do a GI test? Because the GI is involved in all these different body systems. And let's just take a look at that, in a deeper way in a minute. Okay, so we also want to think about polyphenols, because we're measuring polyphenol metabolites on organic acids. And so these take on an extra importance. So sometimes the stool testing will miss everything. You don't see anything wrong on the stool test. And you're like, well, that's strange. Looks like their gut's perfect. But you'll catch it on the organic acids portion, the gut portion of the organic acids test. And so it's really important to understand these polyphenols and what they mean in terms of health and gut function, because you're looking at these lab markers all the time and you need to be able to make sense of them. And it's a little counterintuitive. It's not super obvious. So the polyphenols themselves, cranberry, blueberry, pomegranate, green tea, etc. And there's also herbs that are used therapeutically that are polyphenols, like curcumin and quercetin and resveratrol and plants like that. So what do polyphenols do? They modulate the microbiome. They generate things that are good for you, that improve the stability and functioning of the gut if they're balanced out. Okay, if they're imbalanced, they can interfere with a lot of different things and cause a lot of different problems. But in general, the right amount of polyphenols is what's going to be keeping your gut microbiome healthy, along with the right amount of fiber. And these are markers that we look at on these tests, and I'll show you the labs in a minute so you can see these markers that we're measuring on organic acids. So you eat the polyphenol-rich food that goes into your gut. The gut microbiome, the gut bacteria, break that polyphenol down. They use it as a food supply. They break that polyphenol down, and these metabolites or breakdown products have anti-cancer effects, anti-diabetic effects, anti-inflammatory effects, brain health effects, and cardiac health effects. And so if you want to reverse engineer that, you're eating polyphenols to help prevent cancer, stabilize your blood sugar and prevent diabetes, reduce inflammation in the body, improve the brain function, and improve your cardiometabolic health. All of that just by eating polyphenols. But the important part of this is that the polyphenols act because they are the food supply for the good bacteria. Many of these polyphenols, the molecular structure is too large for you to pull it across your intestinal lining. It's food for your gut microbiome, and the breakdown products of the gut microbiome, these metabolites, have all these protective effects on the body. And we're measuring all this. And if the markers are low, you increase polyphenols. It's pretty straightforward, not complicated. And here's some of the markers, depending on what company you're using. It may be written as benzoate or benzoic acid or hippurate or hippuric acid, or sometimes they'll have phenol, as in polyphenol in the title, phenylpropionate or phenyl acetate. Okay, and I'll show you again on the labs what all these are. If these markers are high, it can indicate that there's an excess of these intestinal microorganisms, and sometimes we call that dysbiosis. If these markers are low, it can indicate that the person's not eating enough polyphenols, and you want to start to give them polyphenols in a supplement form, as well as polyphenols in their diet. You can also, simple way to impact the brain is just give the person fiber in their diet along with the polyphenols. And you'll also see if the commensal bacterial markers are low, or if these metabolites that I'm talking about are low for the polyphenols, you give fiber. How hard is that? So fiber and polyphenols in a supplement form can directly or will directly impact the brain. Beneficial, and there's a bunch of studies I've been reading lately. This is kind of interesting. Beneficial effects of dietary polyphenols, is what we're talking about, on gut microbiome or microbiota, and strategies to improve delivery efficiency. And what they're talking about here is that it turns out that you have to have good gut bacteria in abundance in order for the delivery of various compounds to work, and that are various therapeutics to work. So a gut microbiome that's performing poorly can undermine the effectiveness of other treatments. And there's some nice little schematics from that particular article there. It's amazing how important this all is. And yeah, these are, I don't know. I don't want to talk about the research studies because I want to have time to get to the labs, okay? But anyways, there's lots of research on this, and you can just Google it, the subject, as easily as I can, or go into PubMed and type around, and you'll find these articles. There's thousands of studies on this subject, which are all fascinating to read. So we talked about parasites, we talked about polyphenols and fiber and commensal bacteria. So that's the big picture here. If the person has a parasitic infection, which ones? The ones you have to screen for. There's 4. You just have to screen: blasto, crypto, ehisto, and giardia. Let me say that again: blasto, crypto, ehisto, and giardia. You have to rule those out in every case that comes in. Anyone with any symptom, neurological, immune, cardiovascular, giardia, ehisto, crypto, and blasto, you have to make sure that those are not present. And very often you're going to see that they are. So you screen for that. And then we talked about commensal bacteria, the good organisms, polyphenols and fiber, and we're going to test for, and we're measuring for these good organisms, so we're looking for them as well as we're looking for the parasites. Now we're going to talk about the brain part. If you get the parasites under control and you improve the commensal bacteria, you're going to have a huge impact on the brain. But you can also, at the same time, it's all in the same lab, so you're going to see this at the same time, see if there's a neuroinflammatory issue that's being triggered by the gut. Neuroinflammatory issue that's being triggered by the gut. So there's 3 different ways that the gut can get, 3 different ways that the brain can really take a hit. You can have a neurotransmitter deficiency, not enough brain chemicals, there's just a deficiency. I had this patient once, I don't even have to make up stories, like the real stories are so insane. This is a true story. So she was a actress in Hollywood, but not someone that I'd ever heard of, but she was, making her living by acting. And she was maybe in her late 20s. She only ate fast food, and she was still alive, apparently. She ate at Burger King was like her favorite place, but she only ate fast food. She basically hadn't eaten any real fruit or real vegetables in a long time. Does that cause neurotransmitter deficiency? It kind of has to. If your diet's really bad, stress could do the same thing. If you're going through a divorce, or someone in your family just died, the stress of all that can deplete your neurotransmitters. GI issues obviously can create a deficiency. There's just not enough nutrients coming in for you to make the brain chemicals because your absorption is not really working very well. You can also have damaged neurons because the brain is inflamed, and that can happen because of these infections. So you can have a deficiency, you just don't absorb enough of what you want of what you need because your diet's not very good, or you can have a lot of infections in the gut that are triggering inflammation that are actually damaging the neurons. Because when you get inflamed in your brain, there's neurotoxins that are generated that destroy brain cells. You're entitled to have more than one problem at the same time. So you could have a GI issue, and you could have an infection in your gut along with a lot of stress and a bad diet, and that can all add up. And here's the actual mechanism. So when we look at the labs, you'll be, oh, okay, I recognize this. This is from Richard Lord's book. So Richard, for those of you that don't know, is been my main teacher for the last 10, 12 years. And he's the scientist that developed a lot of these tests that we run originally. And this is one of his diagrams he developed years ago. So here we have serotonin, one of the more important brain chemicals, and we can measure the metabolite of serotonin, 5-HIAA, so you can see that on the lab. It gives you an indication of what's happening with serotonin. You can also measure this kynurenine pathway or kynurenate. So when the brain becomes, let's say this back up, when you start to have an infection, if you have an infection, your body's going to direct tryptophan over this way, okay? And here you go, product of inflammation. So the more infection, the more inflammation is present in the brain, the more you're going to make this stuff called quinolinate or quinolinic acid and kynurenate. It's going to go down this pathway. So every time you're making more quinolinic acid, your tryptophan's being depleted, and that's going to cause a deficiency of serotonin. It's only a certain amount of tryptophan in your body, and that's not a lot. So if tryptophan's being used to deal with a chronic inflammatory/infection problem, and the brain is inflamed, you're going to have damage to the brain from the quinolinic acid because it's neurotoxic, and you're going to have a low level of serotonin. So if you have a brain that doesn't have a lot of serotonin, and this quinolinic acid is causing, see right there, it says neurodegeneration. So if the quinolinic acid is neurodegenerating, it's damaging brain cells, and you don't have a whole lot of serotonin at the same time, that's going to make you depressed, anxious, have panic attacks. Your memory's not going to be that great. Okay, so this is the gut-brain connection, and tryptophan is sort of the mediator for all of that. And we're measuring all this on the test. We're measuring tryptophan. We're measuring quinolinic acid. We're measuring the metabolite of serotonin. We're measuring for all this. So you're not wondering what's going on. Some more research studies. And this is like pretty mainstream. Look, this is like the British Journal of Pharmacology. You don't have to look too far. And they're talking about the kynurenine pathway. You know, though this is mainstream medicine. We're just applying it in a slightly different way. We're just saying, oh, okay, your quinolinic acid and kynurenine pathway are screwed up. Well, maybe that's because your gut's inflamed and you have an infection, and that's causing the brain problem, which is making it one little step further. Super important stuff, though. So here's another view of the same thing, just so we can drill down on this. And we're going to look at the lab markers for all this in a second. Inflammation coming from an infection, tryptophan going down to quinolinic acid, that's going over this way, and you get this agitation of the brain cells, you get this neurodegenerative, neurotoxic effect, and then you have brain symptoms because of the gut infection. And you can measure for each one of the steps on this pathway. You will see the gut infection, you see the quinolinic being high, you see the evidence of neuroinflammation, and then you can put it all together. 1, 2, 3. Oh, all right. So we're going to cut over to look at lab reviews. For those of you that joined us late, this is my reminder that we're starting our exclusive best ever 1-year program now in the end of April. This is my mentorship class. If you want to be best of the best at lab interpretation, scan that QR code, enter in mini April 24, and sign up for the class. Do it for yourself. And it's a 1-year program. We have an online curriculum, which is massive. I've developed over the course of these last 15, 20 years. And I just put a whole bunch of stuff from Richard Lord in there. I didn't even tell my staff that yet. I just put in like 15 hours of Richard Lord into the mentorship. So you get a bonus. You're going to have this whole new experience of being able to listen to Dr. Lord talk about the microbiome. I did that last night. No one knows yet that I did that. It's in the mentorship. If you sign up now, you're going to get that. It's the best of all the lectures of Richard. It's so cool. I've been sitting on that stuff for 10 years. I finally put it in the mentorship last night. Anyways, sign up. You'll learn everything you need to know about lab interpretation, gut, organic acids, how to deal with all the adrenal problems, female hormones, all that good stuff. We got a couple seats left. We want you to sign up. A couple of you, 2 of you maybe, get in this class and let's make it happen. If you're brand new, you can scan this and sign up for a Rupa account and get $100 off your first order. And let me show you right now what you would do. You'll get an email with all this stuff too, so don't worry if you can't figure out how to scan it on your phone. Don't panic. You'll get an email. Just check your email box. But I want to show you the labs now. So when you go to Rupa and you order your lab, you're going to either order. Hang on a second. Let me get the GI parts here first. A GI effects from Genova. It's one choice, or a GI 360 from Doctor's Data. It's your second option, or a GI map from Diagnostic Solutions. Which one is better? It's like when I talk to my best friend Bjorn, and is an Audi better than a Mercedes, than a Lexus? I have a strong personal opinion about that, but am I right? I don't know, probably not. I'm right for me. I like Audis. Bjorn's always buying BMWs. Do we argue about this? So it's just like that. You can't really just see. These are all luxury cars. These are all the best of. These are the 3 best tests in the industry. So just order one of them. Really doesn't matter. The companies are all equally good. GI Effects from Genova, GI 360 from Doctor's Data, or GI Map. Those are your options. Okay. So now we're going to look at these tests, and then we're going to look at the other side of this, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions at the end. So let's take a look. Here, let's start with this one, just because it's there. GI effects from Genova. This is the test that Dr. Lord put together many years ago. It's changed over the years. Of course, they've updated it. And like all these labs, it has a front sheet page that's sort of a summary of everything. And so for what we're talking about today, we're not covering on all of these subjects, but we're looking at infection, and we see infections at a 10. So that should raise your eyebrows a little bit. And you go, oh, okay, well, what infection is that? Parasitic infection. Oh, look at that. It's a red arrow pointing up. So we're going to scoot through many pages of this lab because we don't have time to cover all of this. If you were in my mentorship class for a year, we would cover every single one of these markers, just so you know. But we don't have time. So we're going to just scoot through. And we're going to go to the end of this where they have the pathogens. And it's pretty straightforward. It says parasitology at the top, so you know these are all parasites. And then you look for something that's red, and there it is, bingo. This is life-changing. I have seen E-histo positive, not on hundreds of patients, on dozens and dozens and dozens though. Like, I don't know, what would you say, a couple a year? Let's say 5 a year over 30 years? Yeah, like 100 or 200 people. This is life-changing. If you find E-histo, I don't care what that person's symptoms are, you're going to completely change their life for the better. They will never forget you. You will never forget them. This is just like, I still remember my first E-histo patient was Nancy. She had been diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. She had really bad diarrhea and bloody diarrhea and stool and all this kind of big problem. She was a woman in her late 20s. She was in a PhD program at the university in San Diego. It's my very first case of this. And I ran the test and came back with E-histo. And I was like, what's E-histo? So I called Dr. Timmons. I'm like, what's E-histo, Bill? And he's like, E-histo? She has E-histo? I'm like, yeah, send me to the lab. I was like, send her to the lab. And he's like, he spent hours with me teaching me about E-histo. So then I went back to Nancy the next week. I was like, Nancy, you have E-histo. She's like, that's not possible. Is that? And I was like, I don't know. It's the lab. And she was misdiagnosed as having ulcerative colitis. And of course, when you have ulcerative colitis, they put you on immune suppressing drugs. So she had gotten worse from the UC treatment. And as soon as we put her on the antibiotics for ehisto, whole problem went away. Life-changing every time you find it. I guarantee you that. Ehisto is a horrible infection. Horrible, 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 horrible. Okay, so that's a GI effects. GI map, some of you may prefer, and you can see, again, straightforward, say pathogens. This is the pathogen page, and the first part of this lab you want to look at is right here. See where it says parasitic pathogens? These are three of my four, right? Crypto, ehisto, and giardia. Any of those positive, you've got a really great case in front of you. This lab also includes H. pylori and the commensal bacterial markers. So let's look at this for a minute. They all include commensals, but let's just use this as an example. And you can see how these are low and these are low. So now you know that the microbiome is deficient. These good bacteria are not present in high enough numbers. And we now want to correlate that with the other tests. And I'll just use this so we stick with the same company, Diagnostic Solutions Omics, also known as an organic acids test or omics test. So on this test, you're going to scoot down and you're going to go to the very end, and you'll see what I mean when I find it here. It is very clearly labeled microbial metabolites. You see that? Microbial metabolites. Remember, let me circle these so you remember we talked about polyphenols and the polyphenol markers on these tests? Well, here you go. And in fact, they tell you right below there. You see that it says polyphenol metabolite, in case you didn't know? Polyphenol metabolites. These are polyphenol metabolites. So are these here. They don't name them all as such, but these are all polyphenol metabolites. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that if the GI test shows low commensal bacteria, and you see over here low polyphenol markers, now you know the problem is they don't have enough polyphenols. So what are you going to do? Give them polyphenols. How complicated is that? Blueberry, cranberry, pomegranate every day in the diet, and then supplement with a prebiotic supplement. And there's a couple of favorites I have. I'll mention at the end. It's actually product names if you want product names. I'll give those at the very end. Okay, so you're going to get them a polyphenol prebiotic product. Sorry, hard to say that. Yeah. Okay. So that's one example, and I'll write up a little protocol in a minute so you can see how that would play out. Well, why don't I just do it now so we don't get too confused? So now you got a patient. So let me just reiterate. So the patient had low commensal bacteria, and low polyphenol markers. So we know that we want to improve their microbiome, and we can do that in a couple of ways. I like to think of it as three different things. So let me just lay it out here. Low commensal bacteria, remember we saw that on the GI map, and low, what do you want to call them, polyphenol metabolites, or just say GI metabolites? So as we looked at in all those research studies, this really is an important thing, and you're going to use to fix that fiber and polyphenols. You could also add in probiotics and butyrate if you really want to go for it. So butyrate is amazing because butyrate is a short chain fatty acid that improves gut health in an incredible way. It's one of the more powerful supplements I think that we have. It's I would put it in the top 2 most powerful non-prescription things that's available. Butyrate's pretty incredible. If you're not using it, you should check it out. It also stimulates BDNF. So butyrate helps when it goes to the brain with brain function, and it's one of the most powerful things you can do for someone's gut. Okay, so this is what a protocol would look like. You would do, say, a polyprebiotic powder. That's from Pure Encapsulations. I like that one. If that's on back order, then the other company that has it is it's called Megapre for microbiome labs. That's a good one too. Last time I went to order polyprebiotic powder, I wanted to get some, but it was on back order, so I just ordered the Megapre. They're kind of interchangeable. You do a couple of scoops of that a couple times a day. That's going to give you this one's a little bit better because this one, the prebiotic powder, polyprebiotic powder has the fiber and the polyphenols in it. The Megapre only has the fiber part. So I like the polyprebiotic powder a little bit more if you can get it. And then 1 or 2 scoops of that twice a day. And then you can also use a probiotic. I take the one called Probiotic GI from Pure, but every company has them, 1 to 2 of them twice a day. I took mine today, I'm very proud to say. My gut is in great shape. And then butyrate, I use Sun Butyrate. That's also from Pure. That's in a liquid. And that's 1 teaspoon 3 times a day. So that would be a complete sort of get your microbiome back program, prebiotics, probiotics, and butyrate. If you don't want to use butyrate from Pure or you can't find it because it's on back order, then you can use, I think it's called Tributyrin Supreme from Designs for Health. Designs for Health, I spelled that a little bit wrong, sorry, going fast here. Supreme. And that's a capsule. That'd be 1 capsule 3 times a day. Those are basically interchangeable. I think the Sunbutyrate's a little better, but I don't really know that for a fact. They're pretty close to interchangeable. So in terms of treatment, then we've got, let me just put this all cap, polyphenols. This works really well, by the way. If you haven't tried this yet, this works really well. Polyphenols, we've got fiber, so we're getting those commensal bacteria to come up. We've got some probiotics, which is just gonna help with everything, whatever your favorite probiotic is. And then we've got some butyrate. That really, you can't go wrong if you're doing all those things at the same time, right? So let's take a look at a couple other labs. So here's a doctor's data test, GI 360, has a really robust section on commensal bacteria. There's over 50 of them on here. And now we're looking at, and again, they have a summary page like all the other companies do. And you can see blastocystis and Endolamics nana, 2 different parasites present. As soon as you see a parasite on a lab, you should just take a deep breath. You should go home, you should open a nice bottle of wine, and you should just think, hey, I can relax now because this patient's going to get better. Once you find, it's the hard part is finding these bugs. Once you've found them, the treatments, whether you use antibiotics, whether you use herbs, that'll play out over time. And you'll get it eventually. I mean, I always tell patients, we're smarter than these organisms. We found it, we're going to kill them. It's just a matter of time now. And sometimes you need to use a combination of herbs and antibiotics, or antibiotics only, or herbs only. There's many different variations on how you kill these things. That takes time to learn. I mean, it honestly takes maybe 6 months or a year to learn all the different ways you can kill these things and which protocol you should use with who. If you don't know that yet, that's what my mentorship class is for. Just sign up for it and I'll teach you all that stuff. But it takes 6 months or a year. It took me a couple years learning this from Dr. Timmons. I didn't have him in a mentorship class. I just had him on the phone and all the time, and go to his office. So I was sort of a haphazard way of learning this stuff. But now I've organized all that information into a course, so you guys can learn it in a year easily. Sort of like speed learning. Okay, Blasto and Endolamics nana. Now let's compare that with the polyphenol markers. So this is from another lab. We looked at the Omics, which is from Diagnostic Solutions. That's the lab company that does the GI map. But there's also another test, metabolomics. You can also order it as a Nutrival if you want to do the blood draw, the Nutrival, if it's urine only, the metabolomics. And then we're going to scoot down. We're just looking at one part of this test right now. Oh, well, good. I picked a good one. I picked this last minute without looking at it, but look. Dysbiosis markers. Do you see any phenols in there? Yep, dihydroxyphenylpropionic. See that? Benzoic and hippuric, those are polyphenol-based markers. You see the phenol there, the phenol there. These are polyphenol markers. If they're super, super high across the board, it means that there's the potential for dysbiosis, and you confirm that with the stool test. If they're very low, then you get a little suspicious there's not enough polyphenols in the diet. These are incredibly important markers. The status of this section of this test determines the ability of your other treatments to work. Can I say that again? The status of this portion of this test determines whether other treatments you're going to try, whether they're going to work or not. And that's, I kind of alluded to that here. Let me show you. I'm going to just cut back to these slides for a second. And there's more research on this than you could ever read, but so we're trying to figure out using resveratrol, curcumin, and quercetin. There's one study. This one too, metabolite, a gut microbial metabolite, that's what we're talking about in the lab, of dietary polyphenols reverses obesity-driven problems with your liver. Yeah. And then this other study here, beneficial effects of dietary polyphenols and strategies to improve delivery efficiency. Okay, so you want to see how crazy this is that if your polyphenol markers are not in good shape, the delivery efficiency, the utilization of resveratrol and curcumin and quercetin, those are polyphenols. The utilization of them is not good. So if you want to use resveratrol as an anti-aging product, or you want to use quercetin to help with some immune problem, or you want to use curcumin, which is good for everything, those plants, those herbs are only fully effective if your polyphenol marker section of the test is good. So in other words, you have to have a good microbiome for the quercetins and curcumins and resveratrols of the world to be clinically effective. And they actually study this. I can't believe people study this. So they take a group of people and they're like, okay, we're going to give you all curcumin and see how much that helps, whatever, blood pressure, cognitive functioning, whatever they're studying. And then they look at their microbiome status, and the ones with a good microbiome have a good outcome, and the ones with a bad microbiome have a bad outcome. Because it turns out that it's not the actual plant, the curcumin itself, that's making the biggest difference. It's the metabolite of the plant. It's the metabolite. That's where the clinical effectiveness is happening. These are the metabolites. It's the metabolites. Okay, that's what's making the difference. That's what all these studies are about. So this section matters like so much. It's ridiculous. It even matters for other treatments that you may try. You're not going to get effective treatments with these other polyphenols like curcumin and resveratrol and quercetin if this section's screwed up. So you have to fix the gut first if you want to move on and do these other things. Okay, so for this patient, these markers are high. There's even some yeast markers that are high. So there's some yeast or fungal overgrowth, and there's a little bit of dysbiosis. And then if we look at the stool test that went with this, which is this one. Oh, and this is our eHisto person, okay? All right, so let's look at another protocol, and then I'll take some questions. Let's see, copy here. Where'd that go? Sorry, I got too many windows open. This happens to me when I get overly excited. I can see it though, it's right there. There it is. All right, now I got it. Okay, so now, different scenario. Now we have a parasitic infection. It doesn't really matter which one it is, eHisto, crypto, giardia, blasto. We have a parasitic infection and some dysbiosis. And we know that that's screwing up the gut, and that we're not even going to be able to use some of these other treatments effectively until we fix this. So we kind of have to fix this. So we want to do a parasite treatment program. And then we want to do some dysbiosis treatment. And then we want to kind of pause and retest. So in general, you want to do the antimicrobials, whether it's herbs or antibiotics, get everything cleared out that you think is bad, all killing the organisms, the parasite, the dysbiosis, all these different things. Wait 60 days until after all that's done. During that 60 days, you can do supportive things, but no killing, and then retest and see if you got it or not. A lot of times you'll see that the E-histo is gone, but something else popped up. It's not unusual, so don't get depressed if that happens, okay? You may get, sometimes this happens in rounds. You may clear the first round and then have to do another round. And then the really big decision to make, and we can't get into this in the 2 minutes we have left, but I just want to present it, is you going to do antibiotics or herbs? So I had, when I was in 22, 23 years old, I went to Thailand and I lived in a monastery in the jungles of Thailand. And I lived for a long time in the south, but for a little while, I made my way to a very distant monastery in the north part of Thailand, near the Mekong River. And it was a very remote and dangerous place to be. And I got really, really sick there. It's not like I almost died, but I mean, I couldn't move and I was lying in bed with a really high fever for a long time. Anyways, the monks looked after me as, they would have, you would expect that. And after a few weeks when I could actually crawl, I crawled out of there and I got on a train and I went back down to the southern part of Thailand where they have beaches and healthcare and all that kind of stuff. And I unknowingly had picked up E-histo, and I had that E-histo for 14 years, and I tried to fight it with every herb you could ever get. At the 14-year mark, Dr. Timmons, who has become my teacher, realized I had E-histo. He did this thing which I'll never forget. He prescribed the antibiotics for me. He went out and he bought the antibiotics for me, and they're not cheap. And he brought me the antibiotics, and he said, "Look, kid," he used to call me Danny Boy, "you're gonna take these." And I was like, "I don't want to take antibiotics, they're bad. We're trying to not ever give anyone antibiotics." And he just was, he basically just looked at me with his wise old man look, and I was like, okay. And within like 2 weeks, the whole problem was gone. I had it for 14 years. So there is no problem in certain situations with using antibiotics. We should not be afraid of that. You just got to pick the cases carefully. Many times you can get these bugs with herbs, and I would prefer to do that, but we should all be open to using antibiotics for these kinds of parasitic infections, especially E-histo, Giardia, and crypto. Maybe blasto you can always get with herbs, but E-histo, crypto, and Giardia often require medication. So I just want to be open to that, okay? And don't be so close-minded as I was in my younger years, where I thought that antibiotics were like a failure, on my part as a human being and as a doctor. Okay, so now I'm going to go for questions here and see what we've got. Okay. Gut-heart connection. Ooh, that's the strongest of them all. That's the strongest of them all. I didn't really talk about that. Who's asking that? Linda. Yeah, so Linda, that's the strongest of them all. Really, it is. Let's see. Where do the identified parasites come from? Well, parasites don't recognize borders. So many people come from other countries. They could come from Bangladesh, they could come from Mexico, they could come from France, not to put down the French, but I picked up a parasite in France once myself from a glass of water. They could come from anywhere to the United States. And oftentimes French people, not to pick on the French today, or people from Guatemala or people from Germany or Russia work in the food industry. And then we go to the restaurants and, we're all just sharing subway cars and public bathrooms, and a lot of this comes in a food-borne kind of way. Some of this comes through daycare, and poopy diapers. It's, a large percentage of Americans have parasites, and we're exposed to this stuff all the time, because it's an international world now. And, you know, all you have to do is even if you go to a fancy restaurant and order a salad, who put the salad on your plate and did they wash their hands? That's kind of the question. Now, there's some countries, and not to really pick on France tonight, but I did a few, maybe 8, 9 years ago, I was in France at Charles de Gaulle Airport, and I just ate a sandwich and drank some water, and I got really sick. So you don't have to be in some, destitute country to pick these bugs up. They're everywhere. And part of the reason why this is such a big problem is that American physicians generally think that it's a third world issue, and they don't really know um, what's really going on in the real world there. 3-day collection is still recommended, yep, except if you do the GI map, because that's all PCR, so that's a single sample. So for PCR, which is DNA-based testing, they only need one sample. If only Firmicutes is high, so with a commensal bacteria, if only one of them is high, really it's contextual. That may not be a problem at all. It may not. Herbal protocol. Do we have time? Yeah, I can't really do the herbal protocols. I'll get into trouble. I used to do the herbal protocols, but here's the conundrum is that if I give you the real ones that I use in practice and that we use in the mentorship, they're just dangerous to use if you don't really know what you're doing. And then if I give you like ones that are not very good, then they're not going to work. So if you want herbal protocols, you really have to be involved in some kind of a training program. It doesn't have to be my training program. Just take some other training program if you want, but you have to work with someone who's experienced because if you can send someone to the emergency room if you do the herbal protocols wrong. And the way that we've tried to deal with that in our industry is just by watering them down, but then they don't work. So you have to know, and I spent years learning how to do this. Dr. Timmons was with me by my side for 7 or 8 years. Glenn Frieder was in the same room with me for 5 years, and you need someone like that because if you do these and things go wrong and you don't spot it, people go to the emergency room and no one's going to die, but you're going to get in trouble if you do it wrong. I used to show those and I got in trouble for it, so I don't anymore. Uh, how to distinguish between a current versus an old infection. A lot of that is presentation. If it's PCR and it's positive, then it's a current infection though. Okay, that's for sure. Who can take the class? So the mentorship class, we have medical doctors, a lot of chiropractors and acupuncturists. We have some off the wall people like a pharmacist or a dentist always takes a class a couple times a year. We get people like that. So it's a wide range, but the bulk of the people in the training program are nurse practitioners, medical doctors, osteopaths, chiropractors, and acupuncturists. And it's really a great community of people. We all learn a lot every week. Let's see. Somebody put this up. Somebody wants me to put this up. Here, the discount code someone's asking for is mini April 24. Okay, and you scan there, and that'll get you into the system. And yeah, like I said, so I'm updating the mentorship quite a bit now. Last night I've been wanting to do this for like over 10 years. I just decided to do it. So I took out a whole section. It's 12 lectures of Richard Lord. The first 6 or 8 are him talking about the microbiome, which is like the most priceless information you could ever get. And then the last 4 or 5 are him talking about organic acids. And so anyways, that's my extra special gift for the mentorship students. Nobody even knows this yet. I did this late last night, and but it's already uploaded and in there. So if you sign up for the mentorship, it's in the resource section of the class. And you got to listen to Richard talking about this. It's life-changing when you hear. He's the original scientist that did the first microbiome test. Right? He developed the test. He's been studying this his whole life, and he really understands it better than most. All right, I'm going to wrap it up for now. Take care, you guys. I hope to see you in class. Sign up if you have the moment to do it, and we'll talk again next one of these. All right, bye for now.